Hello coders, today we're going to be learning how we can do another button animation. Actually, we're going to cover two animations in this video, and they're going to be the sliding out and the fading animations. Only these are going to be a little bit different from our linear spawners. These are going to be our circular spawners where we have the buttons spawning out evenly distributed around this circle, this imaginary circle that is around our button brancher. And we'll be able to set certain distances from the button brancher that we want the buttons to spawn at. Alright, so we're going to cover two animations in one video. Let's go ahead and get started to see how we're going to do this. Let's take a look at this picture. Visual representations oftentimes help me out with the more complicated stuff, so I thought that this might help you guys out with understanding how we're going to pull this off. So if you look at the left where we have this circle defined, at the center of that circle I call it the transform.position. This is going to be the position of the button brancher itself. Looking directly to the right, I have a target position. That's going to be the default position that every button is branched out at before it's rotated around the circle. Now looking at the difference between the transform.position and the target position, we can define that as the radius of the circle that we're rotating around. This radius is going to determine how close or how far we want the buttons to be from the button brancher. If we look at the green dots that circle around the circle, that's going to be all of the possible positions for a system where we have 5 buttons from 0 to 90 degrees. Those are all the possible positions for our buttons to be at. Note that the min angle and the max angle can be determined by you. 0 to 90 degrees certainly isn't the only threshold that we can have with the system. You can set those to whatever you want as long as the max angle is greater than the min angle. So I have two equations on the right side of this picture that we need to look at because essentially what we're trying to achieve is the angle of rotation around this circle for each button. So how are we going to do this? Let's look at angle, the first equation where we have angle dist equals max angle minus min angle. We need this angle distance to be used in our second equation, and all we're doing is we're getting the difference of the max angle and the min angle. So then to get the target angle, we just say min angle plus angle dist divided by button count times I. Now angle distance divided by button count is going to be our interval size. This is going to give us the even divisions between our angle threshold and the number of buttons that we have. So no matter what your angle threshold is and no matter how many buttons you have, this equation is going to handle all of that. And note that we multiply the interval times I. That's going to be the green dots on the circle where you see I equals 0, I equals 1, I equals 2. That's the purpose of multiplying by I, so that we can get those that interval multiplied by different values for each button. And of course we need to remember that we add that to the min angle, because let's say our min angle is something other than 0 degrees, let's say it's 25 degrees, we need to make sure that our target angle is going to be greater than the min angle since we need to be approaching our maximum angle. Alright, so now that we have all of the definitions understood, let's go to our code to see how we're going to be using all of this. Alright, so as always with all of the other animations, we loop through our buttons. Okay, and now after we do that, we can run these two equations that I just talked about to get the target angle that we're going to be moving around the circle at. So again, to get angle distance, what we're doing is we're getting the max angle and we're subtracting the min angle from that. Circspawner.angle. Circspawner is a class that we created a few tutorials back. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and check it out. I'll provide a link to that in the video. Alright, so target angle, to get that, again, we're saying min angle plus angle distance divided by buttons.count times I. I just talked about that. So let's go ahead and jump on down to where we set the default position. Remember I said the default position for each button was going to be a certain distance to the right of the transform.position, and that's going to actually be the position where 0 degrees starts at. So it's kind of convenient. The way we get it is we say transform.position plus vector3.right, so we're going to the right of our button brancher position and we're multiplying vector3.right times the dist from brancher, in other words the radius, so the size of the circle, and that's where our initial position is going to be. Now that we have our initial position, we need to rotate that point around our circle, and to accomplish that, we create a rotate point around pivot method, which is going to take three parameters. It's going to take a point, which will later be returned. It's going to take a pivot, and it's going to take our target angle. All right, so let's look at that method definition to see what it is. So it's only 4 lines of code, not too bad. Let's dissect this to see what each thing is doing. We create a target point, which we're going to be returning. We initialize it to point minus pivot. Now, remember, pivot is the center of our circle, and point is that initial position to the right of our center. Now, we say point minus pivot to make sure that we're constraining our target point within the circle at the maximum distance away from the center of the circle. Alright, so we're constraining our point within that circle, and then what we do is we say target point equals quaternion.Euler times target point. Now, quaternions are just they're, without getting too complicated, it's another way of defining an angle. Quaternions by default are on a value from -1 to 1. But whenever we say dot Euler, it allows us to use angles from 0 to 360 on each axis. So when we say dot Euler, we're actually passing a vector 3 to it. We say 0, 0 angle. Now we're only rotating on the z-axis or the forward axis. We're not actually rotating on the x or y axis, so we set those to 0. We set the z-axis to our target angle. And then what we do is we take that quaternion.Euler and we multiply it by target point. Now when you multiply quaternion by a vector 3, you're going to get a vector 3 returned, and that vector 3 is going to be rotated around at that quaternion's angle. Okay, so here we are actually rotating the vector 3 point. And after we've rotated that point, we're going to add it to our pivot and then finally return that target point. Okay, so after we've rotated our point, which is this line here, we're going to do a lot of the same stuff that we've been doing with our previous animations, where we get our button rect, and we set it equal to our get component rect transform. The reason we do that is so that we can resize our button using size delta. We're resizing it based on the current screen size, and then what we do is we use our button rect to move the position of the button, and we're using vector3.lerp to do that. So again, the 3 parameters for lerping is going to be the position we're moving from, the position we're moving to, and how fast we want to move from and to that position. Okay, so once we have this method done, what we can do is see the effects of it. This is going to be the effect you're going for, where it's actually sliding out and lerping to its target positions. Now let's talk about this fading position real quick. What we can do is go to our code again. Remember from the last tutorial where we created the reveal linearly fade method, and what we did was we added this chunk of code right here. Alright, and what we can actually do is copy and paste that code and put it in a new method called reveal circular fade. And we're going to put all that code right here just like this. Then what we can do is go to our reveal circular normal method that we just talked about, and we're going to copy and paste this code right here. We're not going to worry about the lerp line of code because we're not actually going to be lerping to our position. So you can actually copy and paste this code right here and put it into your circular fade method right there. So once we copy and paste all of that code, we have our new method for revealing circularly with fading. Now I'm not going to talk about this fading code because I talked about it in the previous tutorial, so I'm not going to waste anybody's time explaining it again. If you need to know how all that works, go ahead and check out the previous tutorial. I'll provide a link to it in the video so you guys can check that out. Alright, so once we have that done, then what we can do is go back to Unity, and for whatever button we want that to work with, so whatever button brancher we're using that animation on, we want to make sure that we go over to the inspector, and remember we're setting the reveal settings to circular, and in our circ spawner class or circ spawner drop down here, we want to make sure that we're using the fade in at position reveal style. Now just as a reminder, if you're fading in your buttons, you need to have that button fader script attached to each button. Okay? Alright, now then, what we can do at this point is actually play around with our min and our max angle. So I'll go ahead and do that a little bit to show you guys how it can actually affect how your buttons are displayed. So we'll say the min angle is 50 and the max angle is 100, and you can actually see it working right there. Let's say the min angle is 270 and the max angle is 360. So you can see it changing at runtime, and I can actually just go ahead and click this button again, and it'll be working on that angle threshold as I just set them. And then we have this base distance from brancher. Um, so this is going to be our radius setting. I need to, since I'm not updating that in the script, I need to set that from the prefab. So I'll change that to something like 50. So you'll see that the buttons are going to be spawning closer to the button brancher now. Alright, you can see that they're actually spawning like right next to the button. So that's because I changed the radius of that circle that they're going to be spawning around. Alright, now in the next tutorial we're going to talk about how we can actually get this button right here that was dynamically loaded to actually spawn these buttons, to run this action where it's spawning the buttons. Okay, I know I haven't talked about that yet, but I'm going to be talking about how we can do that in the next tutorial. We're actually going to be adding an on-click listener to our buttons so that we can have this actually working for us. Alright guys, so that's going to conclude this tutorial. We covered 2 animations today. I know it went a little bit quick, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section below. If you like the video, go ahead and drop a like. If you like the channel and you're liking these videos and you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. As always though, this has been a Renaissance Coders tutorial. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next tutorial.